All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get going on our keynote speech here today. Today we have a very special guest. He's a longtime Formula One managing board member, currently running his own consultant company. He's been working in F1 for over 15 years through multiple teams, and he's now running his own consulting company called Performance Insights. Ladies and gentlemen, he just released his fourth book. I'd like to welcome to the stage today, Mr. Mark Gallagher. Please welcome. Before
So good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? We got that level right? Okay, it's a great pleasure to have this chance to give you a little bit of an insight in Formula One from a rather different perspective. We've got a few folks sitting here. Any Formula One fans in front of me? Okay, I'll have a drink with the five of you later. For the rest of you who are not into Formula One, you should be into listening to these insights, because I'm going to really talk about Formula One from a very different perspective. It's a pleasure to be here in Vegas, and particularly with Lotlinx at this event, because Formula One came to Las Vegas for the first time just a few months ago. My Uber driver was telling me on the way here he learned a lot from watching Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen driving. He seemed to be able to do quite a speedy trip here. But the thing that I really want to share with you this afternoon is Formula One from the perspective of how we've embraced digital technologies. And it's the kind of iceberg below the surface of Formula One. There's a public view of it. You see Max Verstappen and the Red Bull team dominate last season. You see a sport of car racing. But actually, if you run a Formula One team, if you're sitting on the management board of a Formula One team, you're involved in a business just like any other. In fact, just like in the automotive industry, if you're running a dealer business, we're running a business where we have to ensure certain outcomes. And the outcome that we're looking for in Formula One is a winning outcome. And what does a winning outcome look like for us? Well, there's winning the race on Sunday, but there's also winning as a business Monday to Friday, 52 weeks of the year. And that becomes the focus for us, how we can operate as a technology business in order to deliver those winning outcomes each and every weekend. Some of you will recognize Max Verstappen in his Red Bull winning yet another Grand Prix, as he did on most of the races last year. He won all but 3 of the Grand Prix in 2023. That kind of success is only made possible by us utilizing technology in a particular way. And the thing that I find fascinating about Formula One after spending my whole career working in it is that it's a sport where we combine world-class teamwork with world-class technology. And when you combine the teamwork and the technology, you suddenly start to get those winning outcomes and repeatability about that. For the people in front of me here, would anyone like to hazard a guess how many people work in a Formula One team? How many people do you think work in Red Bull Racing, for example? 50, thank you. Okay, so there's 1,500 full-time employees in the Red Bull Racing Formula One team. And some of you are thinking, what the heck do they all do? Well, the thing is, a Formula One team is an automotive company. It's a technology business that is an automotive business. We design, manufacture, and bring to market a car. That car happens to be a Formula One machine. And in the case of Red Bull Racing, they build currently the best Formula One machine in the world. So you've got 1,500 employees working together in this technology business, integrating aerospace technology, automotive technology, and information technology. So what we're designing and manufacturing is partly a jet fighter, it's partly a high-performance sports car, it's definitely a fully connected device. And the fully connected aspect of what we do is going to be the thread that runs through my presentation to you today, because it's really been a revolution over the last 30 years, the way in which we have connected our technologies to make the use of a data-driven environment to generate the winning outcomes that we want to achieve on a Sunday afternoon across 24 Grand Prix around the season. So that gives you a little bit of an idea about the size and shape of the organizations and what we do in terms of the technological landscape. It's one final thing that I got to share with you. And in fact, Ed and I from Lotlinx were talking a few moments ago about the fact that Formula One operates within a very tight set of regulations. And that is a highly regulated environment, which means that if all 10 teams simply do the same thing, we will all produce a beautifully compliant vehicle that will never win anything. And we're not interested in doing the same as everyone else. We want to do something different. We're looking for competitive advantage. So what the leading teams like Red Bull and Mercedes do is to look for that competitive advantage. And this is where our data-driven environment comes in, because we have so many sources of data upon which we can rely to give us that, literally that winning formula that we're looking for. And that becomes the obsession for the winning teams. How can we extract those additional insights from the data that enables us to deliver that winning performance? And quite frankly, to turn our business strategy from one where we hope to win into one where we know we're going to win. And it makes a big difference when you turn up at a Formula One race knowing you're going to win on Sunday, because you literally have the data to show that you're going to be in the right place at the right time with the right strategy to enable that success. I mentioned the people factor. When the Red Bull racing team came here to Las Vegas for the Grand Prix at the end of last year, the team of people was about 105 staff came. So that's 105 staff, and the race team out of a total of 1,500 people. So you're talking about way less than 10% of our workforce traveling the world, going to the events. The real action is happening back at base, and it's back in the Red Bull Racing factory in Milton Keynes in England that the magic happens in terms of the vehicle design, manufacture, development, and actually we also run our races from the factory. We don't run the race remotely here in Vegas or in Austin, Texas, or in Miami. All of the key decisions are made remotely because we are operating a connected remote environment, which means that we can optimize the quality and speed of decision making. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as I go through the presentation. So in this very unglamorous facility in Milton Keynes in England, that's where the cars that came here and won the Las Vegas Grand Prix, that's where they are originated. And there's one other sort of point to my introduction as to how we set up that winning environment. Not only do we have the people and the technology and the facilities to create a winning product, we also have a recognition that across the year, we have 24 opportunities to win. And those 24 opportunities to win become 24 opportunities to get the right strategy, whether we're racing in Las Vegas or racing in Monte Carlo, racing in Melbourne, or racing in Montreal. So each venue and each event creates for us a different opportunity, a unique opportunity to excel. And I can promise you that as you travel the world in Formula One and go to these different countries, you begin to realize that in each market there are unique characteristics. So our technology has to be fit for purpose to deliver a winning outcome in each and every market that we operate in. And that's really becomes the challenge. So those 24 races, which look terribly glamorous, and I can appreciate it looks terribly glamorous following Formula One around the world. It's not that glamorous an experience, I can assure you. I mean, just look at me. So it's the reality is that it is a set of 24 challenges, non-negotiable deadlines against which we have to ensure that we have our technology ready to go and ready to beat the competition, and this data-driven environment that's going to give us the competitive advantage that we're looking for. One final thing really during this introductory part of the presentation is to talk about our competitive landscape, because being here today at this show and meeting some of the folks present here today, I'm so taken by the fact that obviously in this industry, the industry you're involved in, it's an incredibly competitive landscape. Formula One is about 10 organizations seeking to beat each other in a technology and a sporting competition around the world on those 24 locations. And that is our competitive landscape. And if you just look at that for a second, you'll obviously find some of the brands very familiar. You think about the automotive brands, Renault Alpine, or Mercedes-Benz, Aston Martin, Ferrari, McLaren. Think about specialist Formula One teams like Williams. And then, of course, you consider North America's only team, United States' only team, the Haas Formula One team, which have been competing in Formula One since 2016. And the thing to say to you about that competitive landscape is that all 10 of those teams are impressive organizations. All of them produce a magnificent piece of technology, which if I took any of you into any of those teams and you saw that environment, you'd be blown away by what you saw. But there can only be one winner. And what the winners are obsessed with is how do we destroy our competition? Now, what does Red Bull manufacture? Energy drink. So how come an energy drinks company has been able to buy a technology company in Formula One and transform that into the dominant team in a technology sport of car racing? So what have Red Bull learned to do differently that Ferrari haven't managed to do for the last decade and a half? It's over a decade and a half since Ferrari won any world championship. So how come Red Bull can create a better optimized product to deliver success than a world-famous brand such as Ferrari? Well, the answer comes down to two things, and I've already mentioned both of them. The teamwork, so there's the people factor, how the people are led, how they work together, how they pull in the same direction. And the second thing is how those people then utilize technology to answer their questions about how do we drive competitive advantage? Where can we gather data from and then optimize our strategy around that data in order to drive a winning performance? So that becomes the answer to the question of how does Red Bull somehow come up with a better, more consistent, more reliable, more high-performing Formula One product than many of the automotive companies. Someone I want to talk about is Adrian Newey. Adrian Newey is the Chief Technical Officer at Red Bull Racing. And if you talk to Adrian about how technology enables competitive advantage, he will very quickly start talking about the data, because the truth is in the data. We know the truth is that when we gather data from a Formula One car, we've got about 1,000 channels of data being gathered real time. So over the course of a single Formula One weekend, a two-car team like any of the two-car teams will generate about 2.5 terabytes of data. So you have a lot of information, 1,000 channels of data covering every facet of the vehicle's performance and also the performance of the human being driving the car. If any of you hate having your annual review, you know, when your company talks to you about your review, do have some sympathy for a Formula One driver. They're being reviewed real time in the most data-intensive sport in the world. And what Adrian and his team do is they sit down, they look at the data, and they look for clues as to where they can improve the performance, the reliability, the quality, and ultimately the outcomes of the vehicle's performance. So they turn their curiosity for competitive advantage into something meaningful by analyzing the clues that the data can give them as to where we need to go next. I think the other thing about this data-driven environment within successful Formula One teams is that the data is not there to confuse us. The data is there for us to be able to gain insight. And we just want to know how we're performing. And we just want to know how we can improve our performance. So that really is the clue to how a team leader like Adrian, running the technical operation at Red Bull, is utilizing our data-driven environment in order to generate insight that enables the organization to then pinpoint where competitive advantage can be driven from. If I was to transport you from where we're sitting here in Las Vegas to the Red Bull factory in Milton Keynes, the first thing to say is it would be a great shame because Milton Keynes is a lot less exciting than Las Vegas. But the second thing is if you came around the factory, what you would find is those 1,500 people designing, manufacturing, and integrating the mechanical, the aerospace, and the digital technologies that go into creating the product which we take to market. It's a technology business, and it's a technology business which is trying to drive a winning outcome for us as a business. And that's what is the obsession with working in Formula One. Let me give you a little insight into another aspect. Risk is present in every industry. If you think about inventory sitting on the forecourt of an automotive dealership, there's risk tied up in that. Every industry, every sector has the things that make people lie awake at night wondering, how can I do better? How can I avoid the risks inherent in my business? Well, the risks inherent in Formula One are pretty obvious. If we get it wrong as a business, we can have catastrophic incidents, accidents, and actually we can put people's life on the line. And something that is very apparent today is that when we have what looks like a catastrophic incident in Formula One, our drivers survive those incidents. So risk management has become an incredibly important part of what we do with our data-driven environment. It's how do we take risk, embrace it, and understand what we need to do to drive successful outcomes. And in this case, a successful outcome is ensuring, for example, that a driver doesn't suffer an injury or worse in the event of everything going wrong. Now, in 2020, during the middle of the global pandemic, we managed to put on a Formula One championship. And at the Bahrain Grand Prix, the US team, the Haas Formula One team, suffered a major accident during the race. Going to show a clip of it. This footage went viral, was watched on news channels all over the world because there was hardly any sport taking place at that time because of the pandemic. The driver, Romain Grosjean, was trapped in the car. The car had broken in two following a collision with a barrier at almost maximum velocity. And as you can see from the video clip, he was able to step out of the car, step out of the flames after 30 seconds, actually 28 seconds in the flames. If you want to know about the speed of that impact, it was a 67 G-force impact with the barrier. He hit the barrier so hard, the car went through the barrier. And yet he didn't have a broken bone in his body. He was able to extract himself from the fire. He was able to step out and into the arms of our safety team. How is that possible? It's possible because we have an accumulated 30 years of data from past events that enables us to ensure that in a future outcome, such as an accident, the vehicle will destruct in a way that will fully protect the occupant. I'm only going to leave you with one set of data around this point. I'd like you to think about this. So in the first 45 years of Formula One's history, 1950 to 1994, in the first 45 years, we had 45 driver fatalities. And in the last 30 years, we've had one. So how have we gone from being a high-risk industry to a low-risk industry? The answer is two things. Again, it's people and technology. It's safety culture, but safety culture married to a data-driven environment where we have the data and the insight to enable us to manage risk in the most effective way possible. There's half a dozen Formula One fans. Anyone a Max Verstappen fan particularly? Oh yeah, four people. Okay, so that's now 9 people I'm going to have a drink with later on. So Max, won the World Championship for the 3rd time last season. Max is data-driven. What do I mean by that? Well, let me tell you a little bit about the Max Verstappen story. So he was recruited as a Formula One driver by Red Bull when he was 17 years of age. And he hadn't yet taken his driver's test. He didn't have a driving license. And he was racing in Formula One. And he was so competitive that he was promoted by Red Bull to the senior team. And in fact, he made his debut for Red Bull Racing at the Spanish Grand Prix, and he won his very first Grand Prix that he drove in for Red Bull Racing. Youngest winner in Formula One history. In the press conference after that race, he was asked by a journalist, how is it possible for a teenager, for a kid who's never done this before, to turn up and win in Formula One at his first attempt driving for Red Bull Racing? And Max answered it it was incredible to listen to him. He said, first of all, I drive for a great team. They give me the best product. I had a great strategy. He said, my job is pretty simple. I just have to turn the steering wheel, press a couple of pedals, do the job, follow the strategy. He said, the second thing is I'm not new to this. He said, I've been racing in Formula One for 14 years. He said, when I was 4 years old, my father bought me a go-kart, but my mother bought me a Sony PlayStation. And I've been racing online for the last almost a decade and a half. He said, I will win the Japanese Grand Prix, for example. Journalist said, how do you know? Max said, well, because I always do. I've been winning it in PlayStation since I was about 9. Pretty confident I'll win it when I go to the real track. And the reason I want to tell that story is that Max is part of a generation of employee. I mean, he is an employee. He's part of a generation of employee who've grown up in a digital landscape. He knows how to use technology. He knows how to use connectivity. He knows how to use data. As a computer gamer, he literally spends hours, in his bedroom when he was a kid, trying to go to the next level on whatever computer game he's on. What do we do in Formula One? We are literally trying to get to the next level of performance. And it's all got to do with utilizing that connected environment. So if you look at the steering wheel on a contemporary Formula One car, for a driver like Max Verstappen, it's simply the best games console in the world. It's got the ultimate in connectivity, functionality, applications that enables him to do cool stuff. And if you really look at what it is that it enables a driver like Max to do, he's able to, first of all, manage risk, as well as optimize performance. So many people ask the drivers about performance. It is a two-pronged strategy. We have to manage risk as well as driving performance. And all of that functionality is very much geared towards literally giving the driver at their fingertips the ability to do those two things in parallel. There's one final thing that it also enables, and that is that the driver of the Formula One car inside his cockpit is not on their own. If you think about a Formula One driver as a salesperson, so as a salesperson, their job is to go out there and clinch the deal by winning the race. But they are supported by a team of people who are giving them real-time information and updates that enable them to ensure that they get that winning performance. So for a driver like Max, he's simply part of a digital ecosystem in which when he's driving that race car here in Vegas or, as I said, in Monte Carlo or any of the other 24 races around the world, he and the product he's driving is relaying 1,000 channels of data to the team, to the leadership team. The leadership team at the racetrack, some of you will be familiar with seeing them, Christian Horner and the team sitting on the pit wall looking pretty cool. They're not actually doing a great deal. I just need to tell you that. The real work is being done by the data analysts and the data scientists, because they're analyzing the data from the car and they're able to evaluate everything that is happening real time during the race, not only to both our cars, but in our marketplace, which is the Formula One event. So we have all the publicly available data from our competitors, and we can harness that. So we harness the power of all the publicly available data from our competitors. We then feed into that our own performance, and that's why we run the races remotely. And if you look at that photograph in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, that's the strategy room back at Red Bull Racing. So this is like mission control for NASA or SpaceX. You've got 50 engineers sitting in the room looking at real-time data coming from both the cars wherever they're racing on the planet. And those engineers are then using AI to produce millions of potential race strategy outcomes. On a typical Formula One weekend, Red Bull Racing run 2.5 to 3 million race simulations. And out of those 2.5 to 3 million race simulations, they create the optimized strategy, which Max then uses to win the race. So if any of you want to know why Red Bull totally blew away the competition last year, I would love to tell you it was because Max was like just an incredible driver. It has to do with the fact that Hannah is an incredible data scientist. So it's Hannah Schmitz and her team of data scientists and engineers using AI and machine learning who enable the team to deploy the winning strategy, which makes Max's job a heck of a lot easier. I mean, if you think about it from the point of view of the race car driver, they're looking out of the narrow slit of a racing helmet. They can see perhaps 300 or 400 yards of tarmac in front of them. They have no idea what's going on in the race. I mean, and especially if you're leading the race, there's no one in front of you, everyone's behind you. So what's happening? Well, the big picture is being delivered by this connected environment. And that is what Hannah and her team then utilize to feed Max the information that he needs in order to go and win yet another Grand Prix. It's an amazing environment to work in. I've talked a lot about Red Bull because I'm very close to them, worked with them, have a very good relationship with a number of the people there. But I am in awe of the performance of all the successful teams. If you look at Mercedes-Benz, who dominated Formula One at the beginning of the hybrid era, with Lewis Hamilton in particular, again, Red Bull and Mercedes are the only two teams who have won the World Championship for the last 15 years. And if you talk to Mercedes, again, they will talk all about how they have unlocked insight into how to gain competitive advantage through this data-driven environment. I love this photograph, apart from the fact that it's probably the least gender diverse photograph to come out of Mercedes in the last 10 years. But it's a great photograph because you've got Lewis Hamilton, 7 times world champion, sitting in one of the 2 daily briefings that all the leading teams do. So twice a day, the team sits down Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday during a Grand Prix. They spend about 90 minutes in each of those meetings looking at the data, talking about where the opportunities lie to mitigate risk, improve performance, unlock additional speed. I like this photograph because it's candid. It shows what Lewis is like as a world champion. He's working with a team of people to figure out how can we gain competitive advantage? How can we use the data that's available to us to give us insight as to what we need to do the next practice session, the next qualifying session, the next race session that will enable us to go out and win the race. Now, I know we're in a sort of public environment here, difficult for you all to see the screen in sort of high resolution, but Mercedes produced a little bit of an insight into how data is used within Formula One to enable success. And this is an incredibly simple graph, much simplified graph, which essentially shows the simulation of a Grand Prix featuring the 2 Mercedes drivers and their closest competitor, Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari. And Lewis Hamilton is represented by the green line on the screen. His teammate Valtteri Bottas is represented by the yellow graph. And then their immediate rival, Ferrari, is represented by the red line, not surprisingly. If you're wondering why they only modeled this against one driver, it's actually just for demonstration purposes. Okay, so they model the race against the whole field, but this is just modeled against Sebastian Vettel in the Ferrari. And what that graph shows is that before they go into the race on Sunday, Mercedes-Benz have total confidence over the fact that Ferrari are going to make 2 pit stops. They know that because they've analyzed all the publicly available data from Ferrari. And equally, they've been able to work out that the optimal strategy for Lewis Hamilton is to make a single pit stop on lap 22, conserve his tires, and he will win the race. And they have total certainty over that. So on Sunday morning's strategy briefing, Lewis is shown this, and he's told, this is all you have to do. If you achieve this lap time for the first 22 laps, make a pit stop, and then achieve the following lap time for the rest of the race, you will win the Grand Prix. Lewis, being a passionate, individual and highly competitive, he will say to the team, well, okay, so what if I don't conserve the tires? What if I just drive flat out for the whole Formula One race? And the team will say, well, actually, Lewis, we took the bother of modeling that. So we've already modeled that, and here's what will happen. So they will then show him that if he just goes flat out for the whole race, his tires will wear out about 6 or 7 laps before the end of the race. He'll be overtaken and he'll finish third. So the question to Lewis Hamilton is which strategy would you like? Would you like the optimized strategy that our artificial intelligence has developed, which means you'll win the Grand Prix, get your $1 million prize bonus, spray the champagne, and be a little bit more famous? Or would you like to do what you feel and got your gut instinct and finish third? Lewis is very good at doing what he's told. And the thing that really defines the world champions in Formula One today is their ability to drive the Formula One race in line with what our data-driven environment is telling them. So they can literally deliver that winning strategy with relentless reliability and kind of almost a metronome-like ability to go out and deliver that success each and every time. Final thing I want to share with you, which I thought would be a little bit of fun, is how far can we take this connected, data-driven environment? Well, we take it into every area of our business. We use machine learning in our manufacturing environment. We use artificial intelligence, as I said, in our race strategy environment. But we even use data modeling in our pit stops. So if you think about a pit stop in Formula One, so a pit stop in Formula One is when we have to service the car, have to change the 4 wheels and tires, we adjust the aerodynamics. There's a few other things that we can do. Pit stops are mandatory, so one of the reasons we do them is we have to do them. And a pit stop typically involves 22 of our colleagues who have to deliver about 36 tasks in 2 seconds. So that's what's required. 22 people, 36 tasks, 2 seconds, during which we service our product. And it used to take about half a minute. When I started working in Formula One, which is a very long time ago, pit stops took 25 to 30 seconds, and everyone thought that was impressive. And then I watched as the pit stops became 15 seconds, 12 seconds, 10 seconds, 8 seconds. I remember the first 6-second pit stop, everyone was like, oh my goodness, like that's just crazy. 2 seconds is now the target every time. And that's been made possible by harnessing our data-driven environment. So the mechanics have sensors on their gloves, on their footwear. We have sensors on all of the equipment that is used on the race car. And it means that after we do a pit stop, we can look back and we can analyze with total precision the movement of each member of the team, when the equipment was engaged and disengaged, and the way in which the process flowed. And as a result, that helps us to improve the process, improve the training, improve the outcomes. The result is that you can take 22 ordinary technicians and get them to do something extraordinary, because you're really harnessing the power of that data-driven environment to enable that to be possible. This gentleman is the son of a friend of mine. He's been a member of the Red Bull pit crew for the last 2 years, and he told me that he never would have believed it possible to do a Formula One pit stop in 2 seconds or less. And he said, like, I'm an ordinary guy. The team invited me to join the pit crew, and he said, it's just insane what we are able to deliver. And I said, so what's the key to it? And he said, well, the key to it is the way in which we have the information that enables us to constantly refine and improve our performance over time. So he said we have this constant cycle of review and analysis, of performance improvement, of performance delivery and execution. And he said it's because we have not only the high resolution videos of every pit stop, but we have the data to back that up. So the result is that in 2019, at the Brazilian Grand Prix, with our friend Max Verstappen driving the car, Red Bull achieved a world record. They did a pit stop in 1.82 seconds. Now, this 1.82 second pit stop not only involved changing all 4 wheels and tires, but also involved adjusting the angle of the front wing. Now, you might wonder, how on earth do they make a decision to change the angle of the front wing? Well, if you remember, our friend Hannah is the chief data scientist. Well, she and her team back in England had communicated with the team that they could see on the data that the car's aerodynamic performance would be improved by an adjustment on the front wing. So that was an instruction. It came from headquarters, and now the pit crew set about delivering that. So I'm going to show you the clip of this pit stop. Max comes into the pits, does the job that every Formula One driver has to do first of all, which is to stop the car in the right place. They set to work, they execute the pit stop, and he's gone back into the Brazilian Grand Prix in 1.82 seconds. I mean, it's insane. It's insane to watch it on video. I can promise you that if I've had the privilege of standing at the front of the garage and watching that happen, and it is literally so fast that by the time you try to get your iPhone out of your pocket to take a video, they're gone. I mean, it's just like I've brought customers down there, like sponsors, and said, come and see the pit stop. And they hesitate. They go to look for something and the pit stop's gone. It's over. It's an amazing thing to witness. It's a great example of how you can take your team of human employees, the human equity in your company, and by combining that with technology, unlock performance that seems out of this world. And that's what fascinates me about working in Formula One. It's this curiosity to deploy technology to unlock that kind of outcome. So I'll just show you this again. Max comes into the pit, stops the car in the right place, 4 wheels and tires replaced, front wing adjusted, car back into the race. Not surprisingly, he won the Grand Prix. Game over for the competition. Fantastic. What keeps us going? What keeps us going is that every time we think we have gone as far as we can with technology, someone beats it. And this is, again, a fascinating sort of, I think, correlation between the world of sport and the world of business. Every time somebody sets a record, there's a danger that complacency sets in. And Red Bull held the world record for 4 years. It was beaten in November by McLaren. And I'm going to show you the current world record. It's actually 1.8 seconds dead. So this is 200ths of a second quicker. 200ths of a second, what's that between friends? Well, I can tell you McLaren and Red Bull are not friends, they're enemies. And this is everything. This is about winning performance. This is, Ed, when you and I were talking about incremental improvement in outcomes, of exactly the 1%, 1,000 things done at 1% better, and the kind of work that you guys do at Lotlinx. I mean, this is exactly what we are obsessed with in Formula One. So here's Lando Norris in the McLaren in the Qatar Grand Prix, comes into the pits, lines the car up beautifully. The McLaren squad cover off that pit stop, 1.8 seconds, car's back into the race. I mean, it's over in the bat of an eyelid. I got to tell you, the Red Bull mechanics have pointed out that McLaren didn't actually need to adjust any wings. So like they had less work to do during that 1.8 seconds. But the McLaren mechanics are like, we don't care. We still beat you. And I cannot begin to tell you what this has done inside the Red Bull organization. It has totally freaked them out about the fact that McLaren have gone one better. So if you want to know what Red Bull are doing during the winter, apart from building yet another championship-winning car, they're sitting down, looking at the data from all their past pit stops, figuring out how can we improve by another couple of hundredths or a tenth or two of a second and beat that performance. So that's kind of the end of the presentation. I'm going to take a few questions from you, but I just want to finish with one kind of final summary, and that is, within the Formula One industry, we have experienced what it's like having people resistant to technology. And certainly, I would say really during the 1990s, we had some of the older engineers resisted the arrival of digital technologies within the industry. So decisions were made based on the number of years you spent in academia, the number of years experience you had. So you had these sort of older, middle-aged, gray-haired engineers making all the decisions. They were usually men as well. That was the other thing. So that was the 1990s. And then starting 25 years ago, we began to see this digital revolution. And suddenly graduate engineers were coming into Formula One and showing how data analytics could be used, predictive analytics, and then the advent of machine learning and AI. And I can tell you that one of the biggest changes I've seen within the sport of Formula One is the fact that so many of our younger team members are helping to drive the transformation around how we use digital technologies to improve outcomes. Many people who follow Formula One found last year boring because Red Bull dominated the season, won all of the races except for one, which was won by Ferrari, and said, well, it's incredibly boring. It was incredibly boring for everyone else. It was not boring for Red Bull, okay? And the thing is, when you're running a business where your digital capability combined with your teamwork enables a winning outcome on such a consistent basis, you know that is the formula for success. So yes, we had resistance to the advent of digital technologies, not anymore. Everyone's now in violent agreement that by harnessing the power of our data-driven environment, we create unparalleled outcomes for our human teams. Thank you very much. So am I taking any questions? Anyone got any questions? Someone asked me earlier on for tickets to the Las Vegas Grand Prix next year. That was, I had to say no to that. They're too expensive. But yeah, any questions on any topic? I mean, to do with Formula One, of course, not any other topic. So yeah, anything? Shout out. Yes, sir. When is what? Formula One back to Watkins Glen. I'm afraid that's not going to happen anytime soon. So for those of you who are unaware, the United States Grand Prix used to be in Watkins Glen in upstate New York. I actually went there when I was a kid to see a Formula One race there. And what's happened with Formula One now, and the reason why it's in Las Vegas, like to answer your question seriously, is Formula One has now become a global sports business. And as a global sports business, we go where the action is. And any of you who were here in Las Vegas for the Grand Prix will know that it was an incredible event last year. The Miami Grand Prix has been equally successful. And the Circuit of Americas continues to hold its own with an incredible attendance over the days there. So we're going to where we know there's going to be sellout tickets, big population to buy into what we're offering. There will be, I believe, another fourth Formula One race here in the United States. Some of you will know that Chicago has been working quite hard to get a Formula One race there. New York City and New Jersey are working on a plan. There's a potential street race on the North Shore of New Jersey. It became very close to happening about 3 years ago. But just to give you a little bit of intel, and this is all in the public domain, so I'm not sharing anything that I shouldn't be, but you know, Formula One as a business has a very interesting business model. So each Formula One race generates about $50 million as a fee. So every time you see a race on TV, that promoter has paid $50 million on average into Formula One. So 24 races, $50 million. So $1.2 billion of fees to stage the Grand Prix. And that's actually about the same amount of money that we get paid by the television broadcasters to broadcast Formula One around the globe. So you're looking at about $2.5 billion of income from the fees and then the media rights. And then you come to the sponsorship. And of course, you know, Oracle sponsor Red Bull and Petronas sponsor Mercedes. And if you look at the McLaren Formula One team, they have now over 50 corporate sponsors, including companies like Google and Android and so on and so forth. So those sponsorships combined add up to about another $2 billion. So we're now looking at an industry where you're generating about $4.5 to $5 billion of revenue a year. So for 10 teams and 20 racing drivers, that's quite a good business to be into. And so in answer to your question, we'd go to Watkins Glen if someone rebuilt the circuit and built a compelling case study for it and signed a 10-year contract to pay $50 million a year. So far, we haven't found anybody to do that. Okay, question. Yes, sir.
What about additional teams coming into the F1?
Nick, thank you for your question. There's a question from Nick about additional teams coming into Formula One. Let's cut to the chase. Why did Michael Andretti's team not get given the entry this week? So if you go back as recently as 7 years ago, so you know, that's not a long time ago in business, so it's 2017. Of the existing Formula One teams, 5 of the teams suffered near, if not bankruptcy, they suffered potentially catastrophic business outcome 7, 8 years ago. That has now changed because Formula One under Liberty Media has become stabilized as a global sports business. The business model I just described has been developed. And the view of the 10 existing teams is that they've been through hell to get to where they are today. So today the sport's insanely profitable and successful, but that wasn't always the case. So there is a resistance to allow anyone to come in and jump in just at the moment when everything looks great. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is that unfortunately we've had recent experience, and I know a lot about this because I was involved through my business. We've had recent experience of 3 teams coming into Formula One and not surviving because they underestimated the scale of the challenge. And it is so difficult to emphasize this point enough. To become a Formula One race car team, you have to become what I just described earlier on, which is you have to become an automotive manufacturer with all the ability to design, manufacture, and develop a Formula One car over 24 races. And by the time you get to December and the race season is finished, the new season is about to hit you, okay? And what we have noticed with previous failures is that they all underestimated the relentless nature of the challenge. Now, the view, and this is, we'll have to keep this between the 25,000 of us here in this convention. The view is that the Andretti team, which is trying to come into Formula One, has not demonstrated an understanding of the challenge because they've never manufactured a vehicle of this kind. So it's one thing to buy an off-the-shelf Indy car or to develop a NASCAR. We're talking a completely different landscape. So that's the fundamental reason. I personally believe Andretti will get in, and I believe they'll probably get in sooner than 2028. So I think there will be a negotiation. I'm really keen on it, mainly because I love Mario Andretti. Like everybody in Formula One, we love Mario Andretti. And we would love to see his son, and we'd like to see the family come in. But I think Liberty Media and Formula One are going to make the Andrettis work hard for it to prove that they really understand what they're getting into. Because the thing is, Nick, can you imagine if Andretti got in and they failed? Could you imagine if Andretti got in and let's say after 3 or 4 years they said, we're struggling, we need a handout, we need a bailout. This would not look good. So they just want to be they want to really be absolutely sure that he knows what he's getting into and that he adds to Formula One as opposed to create a headache. Okay, yes, sir.
2 questions.
Yes, sir.
What's your insights regarding electric cars, F1?
Yeah.
The second one, do you believe one day the machine can win a race?
Okay, so just the question there from this gentleman, from Miguel. I'm going to answer the second part of your question first. So can the machine learning or could AI win a Formula One race instead of having a human driver? The answer is yes, but it'll never happen because it won't be allowed. And we've already had this conversation with the regulator because if you ask all of our engineers about autonomous vehicles, the engineers will tell you they would love to get rid of the weakest link, which is the human in the car, okay? So one of the things about having all the data is that we have all the data in the world to show that even the world's best drivers are lousy at driving cars, okay? Most drivers are in Formula One are making mistakes a lot of the time. So if you can imagine what us as the general public are like, I mean, we are a nightmare. I mean, it's a miracle that we were ever allowed to drive anything. So the view in Formula One is that if we were allowed to do it, we would have autonomous cars. And if we were allowed to do it, we wouldn't have a human pit stop. We would build a rig and the car probably wouldn't even stop. We would go through the rig and the wheels would get changed. We're not allowed to do those things. So the regulator has insisted that it's a sport. And they said the sport has to involve humans. We have to have a human driver and the driver has to operate the vehicle. That's why we don't remote control the vehicle. So our data connectivity in Formula One is unidirectional. So the data is from the car to the team. We're not allowed to transmit data to the car. Otherwise, we would get rid of Max. We'd save a hell of a lot of money and it would be beautiful, but it wouldn't be sport. And equally, the pit crew will be retained. To answer your first part of your question about electric vehicles in Formula One, so my last executive role in Formula One was running a company called Cosworth, which manufactures engines, software, electronics. And in 2009, we all sat down. So it was myself, there was my opposite number at Ferrari, Mercedes, Renault, so that all the engine manufacturers, we sat down together with the regulator. We talked about the future of the automobile industry. And in that meeting, we were introduced to a gentleman called Carlos Ghosn. Some of you will remember. He escaped from Japan in a musical box a few years ago. Anyway, he was a chief executive of Renault Nissan Group, and he gave us a presentation on the launch of the Nissan Leaf. And he showed us what Renault Nissan Group's plan was for electric vehicles. This is in 2009. Now, a lot of people were laughing at Carlos at that time. Turned out he was right. He was a little bit ahead of the curve. I mean, it's interesting that he launched the Leaf at the same time as Elon Musk was launching Tesla. And I mean, look where we are now. So we were all told by Renault and by Mercedes that the world was going to start going electric. And that's why we introduced hybrid engines into Formula One in 2014. So since 2014, the powertrain is a petrol internal combustion engine, gasoline powered, and then we have this battery pack, lithium-ion battery pack. And that's been a good solution. It reduced fuel consumption by 40%, still produces 1,000 brake horsepower. The motor is 1.6 liters. So you get a 1.6 liter hybrid 1,000 brake horsepower motor, which can last for it's in kilometers, about 4,500, 5,000 kilometers is the life of the motor. Okay, to give you an idea, in 2005, the life of the motor was 300 kilometers. 400 kilometers. 400 kilometers. So we used a motor a day in 2005. We now use a motor for 3 to 4 months at a time. So so the whole technical landscape has changed completely. What's going to happen in the future is in 2026, we stop using fossil fuels completely in Formula One. But instead of going fully electric, we're going to use a synthetic fuel in the small internal combustion engine. And that synthetic fuel will be produced using carbon capture technology. So we're taking carbon out of the atmosphere, combining it with hydrogen and creating a hydrocarbon, synthetic hydrocarbon. And we're going to dramatically increase the electrical power. So in rough terms, approximate terms, and from 2026 onwards, 500 horsepower will come from the electric system, 500 horsepower from the internal combustion system. They've still got 1,000 horsepower, not using any fossil fuels. And that's what we're going to stick with for probably, I would say, 6 to 8 years. The big question is then what happens? So we believe the problem of the world is not the internal combustion engine. It's actually what you put in it and what comes out the other end. And we feel the synthetic solution is kind of quite a practical one, because it's certainly what the world of aviation are looking at. It's certainly what the world of marine engines are looking at. And in our conversations with the automotive industry in Europe, we're now getting a lot of companies saying to us, actually, we're thinking of having a twin track approach where we continue to have internal combustion engines within our ecosystem as well as fully electric. So I think the hybrid future seems to be quite a practical one, and that's the way we're following it. Yeah. Thanks very much, Miguel. Any other questions? Time for a drink in that case. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thanks to all of you. Thank you.
Bar's open, so yeah.
Okay, good.
Thanks very much.
Is that okay?
He'll make it, yeah.
Yeah.